Hello, everybody, and welcome to another week of the Retro Gamers Podcast. It's good to have you here watching and or listening. Anthony here. And as you can see, this is not Larry. Unfortunately, Larry is under the weather this week. So his loss, our gain. We have a guest with us today who's been on the show before, and we're really happy to have him back again. He is the podcast host for the Yin and Yang Podcast. So, and one of my best friends from childhood. So let's say hello to Mr. Anthony Chu.
Good morning, everybody. I want to make sure everybody's having a great time here. You know, it's a pleasure to be back on the Retro Gamers. This is the flagship show. I love the show. I listen to it every week, as well as everybody else. And please spread it to your friends and let your friends spread it to your friends. Let them know about the show because it is awesome. I'm a big retro video gamer myself, so it's a pleasure to have me back. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, Ant. So, how's life in Jersey?
Man, I'll tell you, it's been crazy busy. Actually, I'm currently right now, I am actually, still at the weight loss bit. I'm down to 204 pounds, which means that since I started about 3.5 years ago, I've lost 66 pounds.
And that's insane, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And as somebody who grew up with you, and for those who don't know, Anthony and I have known each other since, I was 6 years old, I think, when I met you.
Yeah. So I was about 8 then at that point. 8
yes.
or 9.
So, well over 32 years of friendship here. I'm sorry, 34 years of friendship. Wow. But and I know, just before we get into the gaming stuff, you've always been one of those people that struggled with your weight. And I was also the same way for a while as well.
Right.
And I have to say, just to see you getting it under control now and doing such a phenomenal job, and not only that, chronicling it on your podcast, I think it's just a testament to your dedication, your hard work, and I couldn't be happier for you.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I'm very humbled to hear that. And you know what? Actually, I'm taking it a step further this year. I'm actually currently right now studying to be a certified personal trainer. And the reason why I want to do is, I'm actually, it's the very bare beginnings. I'm a horrible test taker, but I really want to conquer this fear. I want to be able to get my certified personal trainer, and I want to help people out there, whether it be on private practice or whether it be working out in the gym or what have you. I want to be able to help other people achieve their goals because, we love, what we do, we do what we do. But deep down at the very core of it all, health is wealth. There's no other way to put it, without that, I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how much skill or talent you have. That's what it's all about, So it's very important that that we take care of ourselves,
Yeah, no, and I couldn't have said it better myself. In fact, I probably couldn't have said it as well as that. So I think, I think that's amazing. I think that it's fantastic. You are, you're 4 pounds away from that elusive 200. I know you've been chasing it for a long time. So I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to the day you call me. Or you text me and you tell me that you finally hit that, and it's going to be really soon too, which is great.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen 200 since my sophomore year of college. That's a long time.
That is a long time. So and it just goes to show you that age doesn't necessarily play a factor in as long as you put in the work. And
I'm 43 in 2 months, and I feel like I'm 25 internally.
And that's amazing. Mm-hmm. That is so, dude. I wish you good luck on that. I want to switch over to our gaming stuff. So, but you've said before that you are a retro gamer. I think you can tell because I think you got a text and it had it sounded like the pause sound in game. So
it's actually the coin. The coin from when you get a coin from Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, okay. It sounded like when you press pause, but no. But that could just be through the speakers that I'm listening to. But anyway, we've been gamers since we were kids and everything. I know God, we used to play a lot of Nintendo.
The amount of hours that we spent playing on the different video game systems when we were growing up was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, and before we get into the topic that we're going to discuss today, let me ask you just really quickly, and we may have talked about this before when you've been on the show, but do you have a favorite console over 30 plus years of gaming? If you have to pick one.
If I really had to just pick one,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if I was okay, let's use the typical. I was stranded on a desert island and somehow I found electricity. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say that a retro video gaming system I would have to take would be either it's a tie. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm doing a tie here. It would have to be either an SNES
Mm-hmm.
or a Nintendo 64.
Wow. Okay.
If you would consider that retro gaming. I just that I love there. I mean, both systems have very unique, very good games I love playing. So I can't say no to that. But and no, and with no disrespect or discredit to let's say like a PlayStation or any of the Sega systems either. But it's just that I tend to sway more towards Nintendo. That's just me.
Okay. And that's fair enough. Do you think do you have okay, so for Super Nintendo and for N64, if you had to pick one game, what would you say the best game is on each one
Ooh.
for you specifically?
So for N64, I love Mario Kart.
Oh.
This just jeez. Is it called wait a minute, is it called Mario Kart or is it like Super Mario Racing? I think it's Mario Kart, right?
No, it's Super Mario Kart. But on I think on N64 it was called Mario Kart 64 or Super Mario Kart 64.
And for the record, allow me to state this. The amount of times I stayed at your house playing that game and the amount of times you obliterated me off the face of the earth, I mean, I have a winning record as good as the Mets. Sorry.
Oops.
Maybe I should use the Knicks instead. Sorry. Anyway,
you know what? It doesn't matter to me. Just don't go over to the hockey realm.
No, I know nothing about hockey. I don't.
There you
watch
go.
it.
So don't piss me off about it.
So whatever team you root for, I root for. That's as simple as that. Okay,
go. Perfect.
As far as the SNES is concerned,
mm-hmm.
I like a lot of the boxing games. It's just because they were so good for its time. I mean, there's a huge far-fetched difference between Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which was outstanding,
mm-hmm.
to this, to these figures that are huge on your screen, almost half your screen, and you're really using real punches, and because Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, classic, legendary game, but when it came to something like Buster Douglas boxing or Evander Holyfield boxing or Foreman boxing or something like that,
mm-hmm.
I think that they made games based upon who was champion at the time, right?
Yes.
So, seeing that, it's just like, wow. Like, I couldn't believe it, they were storylines behind each character, which was outstanding,
Mm-hmm.
Can't go wrong with that, So that's what I would say. Well, let's flip it back. Well, what if you were stranded on a desert island and you needed one gaming console or doing like an honorable mention or something like that, what would you choose?
Well, if I was stranded on a desert island and I found electricity, the first thing I would do is call for help. Wait a
minute. You're telling me retro video gaming would not come first, then play, get satisfied, and then call for help?
No. Call for help first because you don't know how long it's going to take for them to get there. That's first.
Good.
And then while I'm waiting, hooking up the systems.
I like that.
Yeah. See. So while I'm waiting, if I got to pick a couple of games for Super Nintendo, I would probably go with I'd probably have to go with Chrono Trigger. And the reason why I would go with Chrono Trigger is, granted, Link to the Past is my it's my favorite action adventure RPG on the system, but Chrono Trigger, that would eat up a lot of time because I think there are 10 or 12 different endings. So I'd have to put in, I'd have plenty of time to get through all of that. And then for N64, gotta be Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Oh, no question. Good one.
No yes, question. That was arguably the best Zelda game ever created. So those are my two for those two systems.
Before we get into this topic of the day, can I ask you an honest to God, like unfiltered question and give me an unfiltered answer?
Absolutely.
The retro gaming period. Okay, we grew up under it. And I think that a lot of young people today really don't know, a lot about the retro gaming world, at least the way that we do, the way that Larry does and all that. And you see a lot of these games today and a lot of the systems today, and everything is has to look real life. And and I mean, don't get me wrong, they do a fantastic job, amazing projects. What do you feel that there's something that's lacking in today's gaming systems, or in their games altogether, regardless of genre, and all that, regardless of gaming system? There was something magical about that time period of retro gaming that we grew up with, that we were playing with. What is it, do you think? Is there anything lacking? And ultimately, if there is, what is that?
Okay. Well, I don't think there's anything lacking, and I'll tell you. And the reason why I don't think that there is because depending on the type of gamer that you are, if you're willing to seek out the games you're interested in, I don't think you'll be disappointed. So, granted, there are a lot of the games that get most of the coverage today and most of the attention are the more realistic looking games. So you're talking about, you're talking about your Grand Theft Autos, you're talking about your Apex Legends, like all these battle royale games that you have, Fortnite, things like that. Like, and then you got your Call of Duties, your Halos and stuff like that. Today's generation, to me, it's like the more realistic it is, I guess the more entertaining it is. Not for everybody, but for a lot of kids today, let's say.
Okay.
I know my nephew's big into those kind of games. Okay. And he plays them online with his friends and everything like that. It's a social thing on top of the whole, realistic thing. And,
absolutely.
Yeah. And with E3 that just, happened, a week and a half ago, a lot of the games we saw, Cyberpunk 2077, but even games getting remade like Final Fantasy VII, they go out of their way to make the human characters look as human as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And I get that. I was like, but those aren't the only games out there. They may be the games that get the most attention, but if you're not into that type of game, there are plenty of other games that are out there and available. Perfect example. I just finished a game on my PlayStation 4 called The Witness. What is it? It's a puzzle game that takes place on an island. That's all that it is. It's kind of like Myst from way back in the day. You're basically just walking throughout this island.
Myst.
Yeah, you're walking around this island.
Okay.
You're coming across these different kind of puzzles, and it's up to you to figure out how to solve them. And as you solve them, you start to unlock, the final area that you need to go through. And along the way, you unlock, you find sound clips, you see videos that are all from different scientists, philosophers, psychologists, just talking about life and aspects of life. And it's really interesting. But again, I'm a puzzle gamer. Somebody who plays a game like Halo or something like that may not be into that, so they don't look for it. But if you like, whatever kind of game you're into, you can find out there. There are action platformers, there are adventure games, there are RPGs, there are puzzles. It just all depends on whether or not you're going to look for them.
Do you feel realness takes away from do you think realness takes away from the fantasy, or like the kind of like the gaming world in a sense like that we grew up with, No,
I don't think so. Personally,
with Jason, like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like Jason, your nephew, right?
Yeah.
What's up, Jason? Right? He basically, when it's a social thing, he hangs out with his friends, he plays online video gaming and stuff like that. We didn't grow up with that. We didn't grow up with a lot of the technology that we had. So like for us, like, going to someone's house and hanging out there and playing video games. Like when I went over to your house, even though I lived across the street from you, still, regardless, we went to Larry's house or something. We basically, it was like a treat. It was like this amazing thing that we were locked into. We were incommunicado, from the world. There's no contact with anybody else because there was no there were cell phones, but it's expensive. Nobody bothered you. You concentrated. You focused on it. Whereas a lot of kids nowadays would have 6,000 things that would interrupt or whatever it may be, their focus. I mean, do you think that realness takes away from the kind of like the video gamey type of like fantasy world that, we grew up with?
No, I don't think the realness takes away from it. What I think happens is I think the social aspect, if anything, does take a bit of a hit, to your point, because when we were younger, we had to go to somebody's house to play, so that there was actual in-person human interaction. And today that is definitely lacking. I mean, even myself, I'm a perfect example. I play Dead by Daylight on my PS4 almost every day, and I have a group of friends that I play with on there almost every day. You know, we don't see each other in person all that often. I go because we basically just spend their time on there. Now, there's a social aspect to it. We're friends. We talk about, life and stuff while we're playing the game. I'm like, but there's no physical interaction in terms of meeting in person, at least that often. And I do feel like that will eventually that may become the bigger issue. And again, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't speak to that part of it.
Right.
But I do feel like the lack of social interaction or in-person social interaction,
Right.
Then that becomes an issue
because
it changes a lot because I feel like it kind of separates us from other human beings. Interacting with human beings is just something we do every day.
Right.
And every step we take to avoid that, I feel will actually cause issues down the line. But again, being able to strike a balance of that, because we grew up with, having to play them in person, we still have that understanding, and we still, we still need to fulfill that need. So like for every person I play with online that I play with online really well, and I know them well, I do make a point to meet them in person somewhere, whether we go to a bar. We go to a bar, or we go catch a movie, grab lunch or something like that. It's like, there should, like, I always feel like, these are people you should meet in person. They shouldn't just be strangers to you that you speak over a microphone.
Right.
That's me and my upbringing. Kids today, a little bit different. So we'll see how that all nets out. I'm very happy I did not become a psychologist because I do not want to look into it. I'll leave that for the professionals. But good questions. Thank you for asking them.
Can I confess one more thing?
You may confess whatever you want.
Okay. One last thing, and then I'm just going to keep my mouth shut until, we get into the content here. So I don't want to take up too much of your time there, fans, on this one. But I want to make a little confession. You know why I used to love coming to your house playing video games with you? This is a small piece of the puzzle.
No idea.
Okay. Every time I used to come to your house, I don't know if you remember this, but either your mom cooked, all right, or we get pizza. That was not allowed in my house. Pizza was not, for some odd reason, my parents just outlawed it. I love my parents, but they just would not allow us to have pizza. And I used to come to your house so I could have pizza. I'm not going to lie to you. And, of course, real Italian cooking. Yeah, I mean, you can't beat homemade cooking, brother.
I can't argue that.
All those years, I got to say thank you, Mama. Mama, your mom is awesome. So it's like, and she can cook too. It's like, I was like really happy about that.
That's so okay, I'm glad man, I finally. I enjoyed many a meal at your mom's house. I enjoyed many a meal at your mom's house as well, which at your parents' house. So, and it was always amazing.
You're like family to us, So, you are family to us. It's as simple as that. My parents always ask for you, so,
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. Okay. So circling back to gaming. So the topic that we came up with today that I wanted to talk about with you, and I think this would be an interesting topic to get Larry in on when he's feeling better. Larry, we hope you get better.
Larry, you feel better, buddy. Fight the power.
Yep. I look forward to him coming back and taking over the show next week. But what I wanted to talk about are not just your favorite games, because we talk about favorite games all the time. I want to talk about hidden gems that you found on these systems. And when I talk about a hidden gem, I'm talking about games that not everybody may necessarily know about, but they were great games nonetheless. For every, like I said, for every Halo, there's a Witness. For every, that's what I mean. It's like these games that maybe, aren't as popular or may not have been as popular on retro systems. That are actually worth going back and exploring because let's face it, they were great games.
Absolutely.
So I know we've both kind of prepared our lists, and I wanted to keep the systems kind of contained because we can go on and on for hours about this.
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely.
similar to what we did, I think, last week on our topic, I'm
Mhm.
cutting us off at 1999, which would be the Dreamcast, and we're going to start with the NES. So, in your
Oh,
research
okay, okay.
and your experience playing games, did you come up with any hidden gems on the NES that you personally loved, but you don't think was a mainstream title?
I'm glad you asked this question because there's a game in my mind, and I will tell you flat out right now, I didn't even have to do research on this one. This was the easiest one. Whew. You ready for this one, Ant?
I am ready.
The amount of time you and I played this game, we could have gotten a master's degree off of this. Okay. Remember for the NES, Zombies Ate My Neighbors?
Yes, but that was for Super NES.
Was it?
Yep.
I've always thought that was an NES classic. No.
No, and the reason why
Mm-hmm.
I know this is because that was going to be one of my games on the.
Oh, okay. So I am getting senile. Great,
Yep. See,
great. Okay,
Super Nintendo cartridge.
okay. Woo. Okay.
But
I am
yes.
glad I came up with a backup one on that one. But go
Okay.
ahead, Ant. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I mean, go back. So before we talk about Zombies Ate My Neighbors, were there any other games that you thought were on the NES
Yes.
that were a hidden gem?
Yes.
So
Okay.
let's go to that really
So
quickly.
this is a very, very unusual thing, and I say this is a hidden gem because while a lot of kids were playing, Mike Tyson's Punch Out, Super Mario, all these other type of games, for me, okay, one of my favorites was Tecmo World Wrestling.
Oh, I love Tecmo World
That,
Wrestling.
and but here's the thing. A lot of people don't know about this game because, it was overshadowed by Tecmo Baseball.
Hmm.
Okay. It was overshadowed by a lot of the, I guess, what you would call Nintendo doing in-house games like they had pro wrestling as well.
Yep.
And it wasn't like, and then Konami came out with like Contra, Double Dribble, but a
Yep.
lot of people didn't give focus to this game. And I remember when I was in junior high, and I picked up this game at the store. I figured it was all going to be sold out, and lo and behold, there was so many copies there. And I'm just like, really? The
Hmm.
game was phenomenal. Where there are 10 talents, 10 wrestlers, and and each one of them has a unique set. Each one of them has a unique set of moves, and you could actually throw somebody out of the ring. You could wrestle dirty. There was, this universal 10 count. I'm sorry, there's a 10 count, but then the hidden piece, and I don't think I'm going to spoil this for anybody, but the hidden piece is just when you figured that you've beaten everybody, some guy comes out of nowhere and just becomes like challenges you for your title,
Hmm.
which is like that guy is so hard. Till this day, I still can't beat this last character.
Hmm.
He was just really good. I know I've seen you do it twice,
Yep.
but wow, that was tough. That like I don't know if kids can get high blood pressure, but that angered me. Like you have no idea. But
Yeah,
that was a hidden.
and it was a nice change from the WWF games that were coming out then, and then there
Yes,
were
that
and there were
too.
only a couple of other like independent titles like Pro Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have Tecmo World Wrestling in box, not sealed, but I have it in box, which is awesome.
Whoa.
Um, but and one, I was very happy when I got my hands on that one.
Oh man.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good hidden gem. And if people don't know, Larry, Anthony, and I have been big wrestling fans since we were kids. So you may hear a wrestling game or two during this list. And
Right.
Tecmo World is definitely a good one to pick.
And one last thing about this game, what I like about it is that when the wrestler would do their finisher, like the giant swing, or
Hmm.
what they call the fatatical brain kick or something like that, they would literally show you an up close, large screen size graphic of the wrestler jumping and kicking their opponent to the head.
Yep.
And it was this blink of light where you knew it was over, that type of thing. That was amazing. Like you'd never seen that in any NES games like that before.
Yeah,
Mhm.
God, I used to love doing the finishers in that game because it was great.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that really good choice. Glad you brought that one up. I'm gonna throw one NES one out there myself.
Okay.
And again, I talked about earlier how I liked puzzle games,
Mhm.
and this was a game I thought it was a really good top-down puzzler. To this day I don't know how many levels the game had because I never finished the game, and they made at least one sequel, maybe two to it. There may have been two sequels if I'm not mistaken. But the puzzle game was called Adventures of Lolo. And
Mm.
I don't know if you know that one. You were basically this little circular guy on the screen, little circular blue guy. And the object was you had to open chests in a room that would open the door to let you out. But there were monsters in the room, so you had to somehow maneuver blocks and different things around to block the monsters from attacking you so you can unlock the door and move on to the next room. And then every
Huh.
level obviously got progressively harder. And I thought it's one of those games that I feel like just kind of it happened, it was there. Some people knew about it, not everybody did. But if you're looking for a good puzzle platformer, and you want to go back to go back to the 8-bit era, Adventures of Lolo is definitely one of the top ones that I would recommend.
Mm. Mm. May I make a small honorable mention?
Yeah, sure.
Godzilla.
I used to play that game so much. To be honest with you, going back and playing it now, I don't enjoy it as much, but I played that
What?
game. Yeah, I played that game to death when I was a kid. But yeah, going back to it, I'm not as fond of it as I used to be.
Just fighting the monster at the end.
Yes.
Oh man, that was like you used to just want to get to the end of the board or the
Mhm.
level just to fight the monster.
Yeah, I just wish the fighting mechanics were a little bit better because you remember, like, I mean, Godzilla would punch with like his little T-Rex arms and then jump up in the
Yeah,
air and kick.
yeah.
I mean, the only cool thing was when you got to, when you breathe fire,
That's it.
obviously.
Yeah, that was
It was all
the
about
whole
breathing
thing.
fire. But I
Exactly.
actually, and sadly, I enjoyed fighting the other monsters as Mothra better because I got to fly.
I
Mothra wasn't
love
as
Moth. Love
powerful,
Moth.
but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
But all right, cool. So so those are our little hidden gems for the
Okay.
NES. Now let's move over to the Super Nintendo, which you've already started the ball rolling. So let's talk about Zombies Ate My Neighbors because that was one of the ones I have on my list. I actually have three games for Super Nintendo that popped in my head. So that was the first one.
Mhm.
But I will let you talk about that.
Okay. Oh, zombies, my neighbors. It was first of all, it was dual action, so it was co-op, right? And it was one of those games where when you look at this, you're just like, holy smokes! Like, they obviously you're going through neighborhoods, right? And you're trying to find an escape from all the madness of what's going on. I believe, if I recall,
Yep,
because I haven't played this game in years.
a lot of random
And
madness. Mhm.
yeah, lots of random. You don't know. Here's the fun part: you don't know what's coming at you. You don't know what's going to happen, and things could just jump out from out of nowhere, and then boom, you're running out, and you're just like, and just to find the escape room. There are times, a lot of times, where you got the escape room, you left, and then I got killed. So
Yes.
it's just like so. But once it's like once you got into that escape room and you went to the next level, you're like, oh, okay, we can breathe now,
Mhm.
But they got progressively harder and harder, which is really interesting. And there's a strategy. See, this is what's I feel like I'm missing in a lot of today's games is there's a certain sophisticated strategy that you have to figure out. It's
Mhm.
not just taking a gun and blasting people and then saying, "Oh, I won,"
Mhm.
It's basically there's a lot of figuring out. There's a lot of strategy involved to get to that point so it makes you think a lot. You're always on your toes, which I remember, and it was. But you know what? It was never any real zombies. Like they never ate you. They never, you just blasted them or something like that, right?
Well, no, they would
Or
when they would hit you, they would do damage. They wouldn't
right,
eat
right,
you
right, right,
necessarily because we're talking about a 16-bit
right.
system.
Of course, yeah.
The graphics in it were very cartoonish, so they weren't going to do that. But one of the interesting things to point out was it played out like every level was like a different quote unquote horror movie. It wasn't scary horror, you know what I
Sure,
mean? But
right, right.
one level you're fighting zombies, another level there are werewolves, another level it's killer plants.
That's right. Killer
Um,
Plants. That was the
yeah,
tough one.
Yep. Another level, the evil dolls, kind of like like Chuckies, like little Chuckies that would run at you.
Yeah.
There was another level where there wasn't like a giant baby, like a 50-foot tall baby that would stomp you. You know,
Mm.
so many different Egyptian levels. There are with mummies and stuff. That was the cool thing about it. It's like all the levels kind of mimicked, you know, good old classic horror films, but obviously they did it in a fun spin. In a co-op arcade style game. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those ones where it's like, if you want to grab a friend and play something fun, that was the game to go to for Super Nintendo.
Did you ever beat that game?
No.
No?
I think that, you know, I forget if it was like I think every 4 or 5 levels, they would give you a code so you can, so you can continue playing. There was something like 100 levels in that game. It kind of reminds me of Gauntlet. Like Gauntlet was like that with 100 levels, and I never finished Gauntlet for that reason. There were just too many levels. But it is one of those games. It's like I would love to go back and finish it, although I would only want to do it playing with somebody else because that would be part of the fun.
You still have do you have the game still? You do.
Dude,
oh, that's
I
right.
just showed it to you, buddy.
If I ever make it out to Cali, I gotta relive that, man, for sure.
Hey, yeah, you may get out here. We can definitely make that happen. We can play some Tecmo World Wrestling too, and I can whoop you.
Hey, bring it on, brother. We've always been competitive, so it's like and that's what I love about it, you know. So that's really, really cool.
And speaking of, since I want to move, let's move on to another Super Nintendo. Now I have a few Super Nintendos, so I'm sorry that it may be a little more heavy on that gaming system. But and we were just, we talked about Tecmo World Wrestling. I'm going to go to another wrestling game that was on the Super Nintendo. Now, granted, at this time, WWF had a lot of really popular games on the Super Nintendo. You had Royal Rumble, Super WrestleMania, Raw, and stuff like that. But this one, I have to say, was probably the sleeper on the system. And I also still have a copy of it that I purchased, apparently for $2.99. I don't know when I bought it. It must have been a while ago. But Saturday Night Slam Masters. Do you remember this one?
Yeah, of course I remember that.
So the interesting thing about this game is that this was done by Capcom, and this game actually had a character from the Final Fight games in it. Was it Final Fight? Yeah, Final Fight. With remember Hagar, the large guy?
Hagar, yes,
Hagar. Yeah, because he was from a different action-oriented game.
That's right. Yes.
That they moved into this game. But Saturday Night Slam Masters, I have to say, it was an awesome game. Brilliant concept. You would travel around the world fighting each other. The characters were kind of, they were big, they were bulky. The moves were fun. You got to fly outside. I forget the name of the little guy who was like, who was really known for like jumping around a lot. Because this was like the first game that really introduced us to kind of more aerial kind of moves with wrestling.
Now for those of you fans out there, and let me just chime in real quick. For those of you fans who never lived through this time period, I want you to understand that in the world of professional wrestling at that point, up to like 1996, 1995 or so, if in professional wrestling, you have to be over 6 feet tall and over 200 pounds. It was very, very, it was like to see a small little person, meaning small, meaning short, okay? In other words, like 5 feet tall, 5'5", or anybody under 6 was unheard of in the wrestling world. So to see a character like that can do all these aerial moves was considered unreal. And that was really, in some senses, the very first glimpse of a lucha libre, meaning a Mexican wrestling style or Japanese high-flying cruiserweight style. But up till that particular point, it was still. And what year was that game made?
This game was made copyright 1991.
Okay, so even at that time, this is 5 years prior to any Rey Mysterio type, talent. So this was like an absolute treat. I mean, I remember we were playing that in your house one time. We were mesmerized by that character. Because
the
moves like that before.
Yeah, the moves on it were just absolutely amazing. And as we do this, I'm trying to pull off all the stickers that were on it.
Oh,
but trying to keep the game a little cleaner.
Yes.
But the cool thing about it was that like because we were getting introduced to characters that wear lucha masks, which weren't commonplace in American wrestling.
Right, exactly.
and just really cool moves, fun stuff, over the top characters. It was just super
Right,
fun.
right.
So
Exactly.
if you are a wrestling fan and you haven't tried Saturday Night Slam Masters, it was also an arcade game, so you were able to play it in the arcade. That's where it originated.
There you
Um,
go.
but definitely check that out.
Okay.
Do you have any other Super
Yes.
Nintendo? Because okay,
Since I messed up on the NES version
yep.
on that one, I did come up with one that I played actually when I was in Hong Kong.
Ooh.
And so for those of you who don't know, a lot of things that come from Japan go through Hong Kong because of the trading port. I don't know why, but they do. And at that time, when I went back to China and Hong Kong, my cousin Ricky, who was actually playing a game for their NES system, their Super NES system, called Terranigma in 1995.
Okay.
It's more of a Japanese import, and most American fans won't, or North American fans won't know what it is. But I did a little research on it, and this is what it says. It says here it was released for the Super NES 1995. It says here we can't blame our American traders if they have never heard of this game. It was released first only in Japan, then translated to other languages for European and Australian-based gaming systems. Based on a world shaped from a fight between light and darkness, a boy living in a village of Krista on the inside of the earth comes across a calamity that forces him to explore the surface world. Right? The game has been lauded for its complex story, deep themes, and of course, its gameplay. Perhaps it's worth an import, according to this one site that I went to.
Mhm.
And I recall this game, and again, really for me, a lot of it, my cousin was really into this type of thing. It was more graphics for me,
Okay.
and they, because in Hong Kong, they're not really more concerned about graphics. They like logical thinking games out there at that time in the 90s. So they were more strategic, they like deep, complex stories, that type of thing. For me, it was more the graphics. Like, I've never seen something like that before. And just moving level through level. I'm sorry, this is like something that may not be Terranigma is not something that like you would have to play it to really understand how awesome it is,
Mhm.
But that was a classic at that point for me.
All right, cool. I'll be honest with you, never heard of it, but I am pleasantly intrigued now.
Oh,
And since
okay.
I have some future trips to China coming up, I may
Oh,
I may be on the lookout for that game now, Terranigma.
Terranigma. Yep, 1995. There you go.
All right, I'll keep a lookout for it.
Okay.
Okay. The last one that I have on Super Nintendo, and this is one that a lot of people don't. Oh, that's interesting. There's a label on this one too, but this is an RPG game that follows a film noir style
Mhm.
and
Yep.
story, which is really cool. And it's one of those ones that's really not, I don't think, that well known, but it really should be. It's called Shadowrun. I don't know if you've ever heard of this game, but basically you're playing like this. You're playing this character, or I don't know if he's a detective or not. But the game opens with you waking up on your own slab in the morgue, and you don't know what's happened to you.
What?
That is exactly how the game starts. So then you're basically trying to unravel the mystery of how you wound up, I guess dead or almost dead, and in a morgue. And again, like I said, it's a dark, gritty city that you're going through. It's kind of almost a top down view. It's like a 3/4 top down
Right,
view in a
right,
way.
right.
And basically you're just walking around trying to unravel this situation in the city. And then while you're doing this, people are showing up and trying to kill you. Um, so it was a really interesting, unique way to do an RPG back then. It's got some futuristic sci-fi elements to it, which is really cool. Again, it's another game that I started and never completed when I was younger, and
Okay.
and if I'm remembering correctly, this is not the original cartridge I had. I wound up buying it again years later, because
Wow.
it says property of Tri-State Rent-A-Movie in Dixon, Illinois, and I have the
Hmm.
phone number if anybody wants to call them. I have a feeling they're not there anymore, but
Wow.
but definitely like Shadowrun. If you don't know anything about this game, this is definitely one to look into and check out because again, really surprising depth for and original content. Definitely an original story that's worth looking into.
I'm
So
gonna definitely take a look at it now because when I went back home a few weeks ago, my mother just comes up to me And she's like, by the way, I found this in the basement. I was wondering, like, what the heck is this stuff? So you know what it was? My
The Super
original
Nintendo.
Super Nintendo and
Uh-huh.
my original N64 with 2 controls.
Oh, that's awesome, dude.
In a
Awesome time.
while.
Time to play some stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Let's move on to the Sega Genesis for a minute because I know
Okay.
we don't give Sega Genesis a lot of love on the show.
We
Um,
don't.
and I know, and it sucks because Larry and I both grew up heavily on the Nintendo side. So I had a Sega Genesis, but the thing was, whenever a game came out that was available for Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, I always wound up with the Super Nintendo version.
Okay.
My Sega Genesis experience was a little lacking. I was actually more experienced on the Sega CD side because I thought the Sega CD was cool.
Mm.
But for
Hmm.
Sega Genesis, there are definitely a lot of gems on there. But can you name one? What did you come up with for?
Okay, so what I came up with was something quite unusual. This is a game that I don't think a lot of people have ever heard of. It's called Vector Man
Oh, I
in
love Vector
1998.
Man.
Okay, now you know what it is. For some odd reason, it never really blew up until much later. It became
Mhm.
like a cult classic, right? And Vector Man was pretty dang cool because it was created by Blue Sky Software, and the way it was released in 1995. All right, and it's basically this action platform single player game
Mhm.
that the storyline, for those of you who don't know, is that it's set in this futuristic, like 2043, and it says here, according to this, the human population of Earth embarks on a migratory voyage to try to colonize other planets. They leave a mechanical, what they call orbots or orbits, to
Mhm.
clean up the mess that they made on Earth through littering and pollution. So what happens is that it becomes like this. It was something that happens that it comes this evil dictator named Warhead comes about, right?
Mhm.
And he declares himself the ruler of the Earth and begins to prepare. He begins to prepare to execute any humans to dare to return to their planet. So in other
Okay.
words, so humans are kicked out. Now this is where Vector Man comes in, and he's this humble Orbot, and he's in charge of cleaning up the sludge and everything like that. So imagine the Toxic Avenger going full futuristic, you know, and he sees all the chaos, and he's the guy who basically just saves the Earth. Now it was good enough that they made Vector Man 2. Have you ever played that?
No, I never played the sequel.
Because there is a two, and made by the same people, and it was made in the next year, '96, but it never really caught on as good as the original. You
Okay.
know, yeah, Vector Man is one of those hidden gems, man. That I remember I played over at a friend's house, and it was just really cool. The graphics were amazing. The story, I mean, to have a good story like that, I'm surprised they didn't make a movie like that. In today's world, because that's a very good plot line. I
Yeah.
like
Well,
it. The
I
storyline's
mean,
excellent.
uh, film studios are dipping into video games as we speak, so you never know. It may pop up somewhere.
Or we're rebooting everything in Hollywood now.
Or reboots. Who knows? Who knows what's
Yeah,
going on over there?
but
But
that
that
would be
doesn't
pretty cool. You know,
doesn't stop games from being good games. So Vector
Mhm.
Man, good
Right?
choice. Um, my choice for the Sega Genesis is a pretty obvious choice, even though to me it's a hidden gem for sure. Well, I had two. This was the first one that I wanted to discuss, and it's an action oriented game that we Larry and I have talked about before, named Comics Zone, and it was Comics Comix.
Never heard of it.
Okay, Comic Zone was an action platformer where you were basically the hero of a comic book, and it was like a side-scrolling action adventure. So you would basically run through your screen and beat up the characters. But the thing was, when you got to the end of your screen, the game played out as if you were on a comic book page. So your screen was like a panel in a comic book. So what would happen is after you were done fighting on that screen, you would jump over to the next panel and then continue fighting. And then when you were done with that panel, you would jump down because think of the way a comic book page is laid
Right,
out.
right, right.
So you
Oh,
ran through the level like you were running through a comic book page.
nice.
And it was really fun. And then when you got to the end of the page turned and you continued. So it was just such a unique concept. I don't think it got the love it deserved. It may have come out a little bit late on Sega's life cycle, but the game itself, super fun, and it would keep to the rules of the comic book. So whenever you would talk, you'd get a speech bubble. If you were thinking, a thought bubble would come up. If there was exposition, it would pop up on the top of the panel the way it would in a comic book. So they literally kept it true to a comic book form. Very unique, very clever, and more importantly, very fun. So if you've never played Comic Zone, go pick it up or find it somewhere. I think that's the only way you can do it, because they've never released it, I don't think. No, actually, I'm wrong. I think they may have released it on Xbox Live at some point. I do remember it, like when they were doing the Sega Classic series. It might have been available there. I don't know. I doubt that it is now. It might be. But definitely a game worth checking out, Comic Zone. Mm-hmm.
That sounds insane.
Yeah.
That was really cool. Let's see. The only honorable mention I have for Genesis is Golden Axe.
I love Golden Axe.
Okay, that's like before your Game of Thrones and all that other stuff, there was Golden Axe. And Golden Axe was one heck of a fun. It looked like you know what? It was funny because some of my classmates said that the main character looked like a reject He-Man.
Yeah, or a reject Conan. Yeah.
Or a reject Conan. Right. Yeah. Exactly. But
no,
Golden Axe was kind of fun. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a cool game. I think that one was probably a little more mainstream because it was in the arcade. There were sequels to that. I think that one may have been well known. One other hidden gem for the Sega Genesis I came up with is actually funny because I just played the arcade version of the original. This was a sequel that I had that I loved, and I really wish I still had it. I sold it back to Funko Land many, many years ago.
Funko Land.
Funko Land was the first game store to ever come out that sold, that really, really got into the whole used gaming sale business. Mm-hmm. Because, when you went to Toys R Us, electronics boutique, places like that, they really weren't into that. But Funko Land really, I felt like for us on the East Coast, started that trend. But this was a horror game, and what I loved about it was it did not shy away from the gore content, even though it was like a 16-bit game. Mm-hmm. And again, it was a side scroller called, and this was one of the sequels, Splatterhouse 3.
Yes, I remember that. Splatterhouse was crazy, man. Yeah.
And the original Splatterhouse came out on the TurboGrafx 16.
Yes.
And it's incredibly rare to find. It's incredibly rare to find. I actually have I have it for the TurboGrafx 16, the Japanese version, which is really cool. But Splatterhouse 3 to me was like the epitome. I mean, they ramped up the gore, they ramped up the fun in terms of the horror aspect of it. And it was just a great series that had a really dark story, because it was all about trying to save, your girlfriend, and she winds up getting killed, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like there's an ultimate happy ending here. It's more about revenge and stuff, but super cool game. Like I said, really dark, really gory, again, cartoonish violence, of course, for the Sega Genesis, but definitely one that you don't want to miss out on if you've never played it.
That's one of those games within that series, and correct me if I'm wrong, 1 and 2 are good, but somehow along the way, some way or the other, they got the formula right for 3.
Yeah, I think they got better along the way. Like I recently played the original Splatterhouse in the arcade. Because Barcade, which opened here in Los Angeles, has it, and I can see where they built how they built up to Splatterhouse 3, like how they improved on it, because the original game is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm like, but it's a little more rudimentary compared to Splatterhouse 3.
Right,
so again, any game in the Splatterhouse series to me is a hidden gem because it's not that well known and worth your time.
Right. Okay. There you go.
And how about we move on to PlayStation?
Okay. There are 2 games that I think one's quite controversial, and I think that this would be for the PS1. So one of them, the game that I found, it was 1998's Knockout Kings.
Okay? Oh, okay, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who don't know, Knockout Kings was basically, they used real life boxers. Oscar De La Hoya, Muhammad Ali was in it. Sugar Ray Leonard was in it, I believe. The thing about Knockout Kings is that if you are wondering where Fight Night came from for EA Sports, Knockout Kings was their predecessor. So that was the platform that pioneered Fight Night. And it was just, there were people, okay, who literally would go to, and there's no online gaming at that point. There were literally kids who I've read on blogs and a lot of, I've seen some YouTube, videos where they would talk about this game, and kids would literally create belts, like championship belts, playing with their friends to see who the Knockout Kings champ was. And they would go to like other friends' house and stuff like that and challenge for their titles. So you would have it was just crazy because people love this game. I think this is one of the very first boxing games that actually used real life, boxers. I mean, obviously you had Boston Douglas boxing, you had, Evander Holyfield boxing, which is a name. And yeah, I think that person was in it. But to see a multiple cast from different weight classes of real life boxers was unheard of at that time.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I think, I remember playing Knockout Kings on the PlayStation, and it was a lot of fun. And I wasn't big into the boxing games, to be honest with you. I mean, I had a couple, obviously Mike Tyson's Punch Out and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I even had Evander Holyfield boxing at one point. But Knockout Kings to me is kind of one of the ones that really started the solid transition into 3D boxing.
Right.
And then obviously you got into more serious ones as time went on with other systems. So that's a good pull. I like that pull. I also have 2 games on the PlayStation. I'm going to talk about one of them right now. And there were 2 versions. There were 2 of these games that came out, and now we're getting into more. I don't know if it's more puzzle, but my love for rhythm games started on the PlayStation with Parappa the Rapper, which is a fairly well-known game. And basically,
I've never heard of it.
Oh, see, well, that wasn't even the hidden gem that I was coming up with. But basically, the idea of the game was a song gets played, and you have to press, directions and buttons to the beat in order to continue playing the song. That was, and Parappa the Rapper was one of the first games to come out with that, and it was about a paper thin character called Parappa, who was literally every level he was rapping through it to get to some type of goal. So in one goal he's learning in one level he's learning martial arts, in another level he's just trying to go to he's at a gas station trying to go to the bathroom, and he's trying to get through the line, and he does it by doing a rap off with the other characters in line. It's just really fun and unique thing. Okay, so that was an extra hidden gem I'm throwing at you. The games that I'm talking about, and a lot of you guys will, you and everybody else that we used to hang out with, will remember these games because they weren't very well known here in the U.S. They didn't sell very well here in the U.S. and they're very rare. They're very hard to find in the U.S. But they were 2 rhythm dance games called. It was Bust a Groove and Bust a Groove 2.
That was an awesome game.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I remember that. Yes.
And the cool thing about these is that the music in the game, the tracks were really, really great. There's actually one track in here that Michael Jackson actually did.
Really?
And you can hear, yeah, he does some of the backup vocals on it. And it's called, it was from the History album. Too Bad was the name of the song.
Yeah.
And they used a piece of it in one of the levels on this game. But the whole idea was there were 10 characters in the game. Each character had their own level that catered to their theme and their own song. And the idea was to outdance your opponent. And the way you did it was you had to do a combination of moves on your controller, and you had to hit a button at the right point in the beat in order. And then as you were, the better you did, the more complicated it became. Really, really fun. Again, super fun game. And then I never got the sequel. The US sequel is hard to find. Bust a Groove 2, the American version. But at the time, I was working in a video store. Do you remember the video store around the corner from us at?
Seals, yeah.
Yeah. Avenue R Video, it was called.
Right. Oh, okay.
Right. And I had the ability at the time. Now, again, this was like pre-internet, before you can just very easily order anything you wanted online from around the world. I was able to get Japanese imports. And one of the Japanese imports that I got through the video store was Buster Groove 2.
Huh.
And again, similar concept, more levels. They actually had in your single player mode, there was more progression options depending on how well you did in each one. And again, it's very hard to find the American version, and I really want to get my hands on the American one because but again, in terms of the game itself, it's very easy and intuitive in terms of choosing the menus and stuff like that. And again, just built up on the original version. Really, really fun. So if you like rhythm games and you want to kind of go back a ways, Parappa the Rapper to me is the first really great rhythm game, and then follow that up with getting your hands on some Buster Grooves.
That was before Buster Groove was before when you can actually go into like a Dave and Buster's, and what's that game nowadays that you can actually dance?
Dance Revolution.
Platform? Yeah. Do you think that was a predecessor?
Oh yeah, no, I think that it all it all started with rhythm games like this. But remember, you can go all the way back in terms of playing on a pad. You can go all the way back to the NES Power Pad for stadium track events and stuff like that. So the concept was always there. Eventually it got translated into the arcade first with this whole concept. I think I was but then on platform games like Parappa, Buster Groove, I think really started to bring those out.
Cool. All right.
Do you have any other PlayStation?
Yes. Manhunt.
Oh wow. Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a sick game. Where for those of you who have never played Manhunt as a kid, basically we used to do this in school, but basically it was just hey, tag, you're it, right? In this version, just think of what's the best way to put it. Think of the movie Saw. In some senses, it was bloody, gory, and just sick. And I'll put it to you this way: it was one of those games that was highly, highly controversial because when it came out, there were actually people who literally killed other people. And a lot of the media was blaming, they were playing this game Manhunt, and and they got this idea from this game, and they were influenced by this game. Well, which is typical, right, of the media to do. You can literally, there was this one thing where I was playing it where you're hiding, and as this person is searching for you, you're searching for this person as well, and you literally cover a plastic bag over their head and you suffocate them to death. That was nuts. It's when I saw this, I was just for the first time when I saw it, and I still have that game at my house. How in the world is it that they even cleared at that time the censorship? Because it was just unheard of. You don't do stuff like that back then. I mean,
well, I think
it was just very highly controversial.
I think what happened was when we got to the Sony PlayStation,
and I think by the way, I think Blockbuster actually banned that game.
They might have very well
Something
done
like
that.
yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When we got to the Sony PlayStation, I think games started to become more adult because kids who latched onto gaming with the Nintendo, right, were growing up.
Right.
And how do you cater to kids who are now growing up into adults? You gotta up the maturity content. So maybe the kids who weren't into these cutesy games anymore wanted to play something a little more, serious. And that's where you got games like Manhunt and stuff like that. And I think I thought it was really cool because, again, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, there are games suited to everybody. Adults, kids, people who like shooters, people who like puzzle things, and whatnot. It's all out there available today. Back when the Sony PlayStation was around, I mean, they were slow. That's when we were kind of slowly getting into or starting to get into those things. Sega did a lot of mature content as well to try and appease older gamers.
Right.
So I just think I just think that was just part of the natural progression. And Manhunt was definitely one of those games where it's if you wanted to play a mature game, that was the one to play. That was one of the ones to play.
Sure, absolutely.
Yep. The other PlayStation game that I have, and we'll wrap up PlayStation here, is again, I talked about how much I like puzzle games. Larry actually talked about this game because it's on the Sony PlayStation Classic, but the Japanese version, not the American version. And I used to play this game ad nauseum when I was a teenager. And not only that, my mom was obsessed with this game. It was very strange because this was probably one of the few games, Tetris was one of the games in my house that was universally loved. Everybody played it.
Your mom played this game?
My mom used to love playing this game. And it used to have, and it has a co-op option. So when we were both home, we would play it together. And it was actually really fun.
I gotta hear this one.
Yeah, next time she visits, I should really pop this one in and we should play it. But it's a puzzle platformer called Devil Dice. And the idea behind Devil Dice this was 1 to 5 players, so you can have up to 5 people playing this game, which was unheard of back then. Wow. But the idea behind the game is that you're in control of this devil standing on top of a board with dice, and the idea is the dice are 3D on the board, and as you walked around the dice, you would turn them. And on the board, which is a big grid, other dice would pop up. And the object is to get the dice to disappear. And the way that you did that was you paired the dice up with numbers that matched. So in other words, if you wanted to get dice to disappear with the number 2 on top, you had to put 2 dice next to each other and they would disappear. If you had 3s, you had to put 3 of them next to each other. 4 4s, 5 5s, 6 6s. And obviously, the more dice you clear from the board, the better your chances because you keep the board clear. As soon as the board filled with dice on every square, you lose. So it's basically you're just playing against time. And then on top of that, there was a single player challenge mode where you were given different boards, and you had a certain number of moves you can make to get the dice to match up. All in all, super challenging game, really unique puzzle game. And even on the back of it, they have some reviews on the back of it. PlayStation Magazine at the time gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and EGM, if you remember Electronics Gaming Monthly, yes. a furiously addictive and original puzzle game that is so compelling that even your mom will probably go for it. And case in point, my mom went for this game. So EGM was right on the money.
Nice.
And this game is 21 years old. This was 21 years ago.
Wow.
Devil Dice.
Good
and again,
Lord.
Excellent game. I was very happy when I heard it showed up on the PlayStation Classic in Japan because it makes me want to go get a PlayStation Classic from Japan now.
Right. Oh man,
So
that's so cool, man. Wow.
All right, dude. All right, we got 2 left. Let's get into the N64.
N64. Okay. The N64 is one of those gaming systems that I don't think this was the hardest one to research, but I do have to give the props to this one. And you may not agree with me on this one, but NWO versus the World. Or was it WCW versus the World?
Yeah, no, WCW.
WCW.
WCW
versus NWO.
No. Oh, WCW versus the World for N64?
Was that what it was called?
Was that the original one before WCW NWO World Tour?
Yeah, that was the one before.
All right. So WCW versus the World, I think, was on Sony PlayStation. Was not on N64.
You sure?
Yep, because I had it.
Okay.
In fact,
because
let me rephrase that. I still have it.
Okay. So then, what I'm referring to is WCW versus NWO World Tour.
That was the first N64 game from THQ.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was, and that's the game I'm talking about. And what I liked about it was the idea, the roster was massive.
Yep.
There was so many different characters that you could play.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the idea of it was that you also had, I could be wrong about this because I don't have the game, you had international wrestlers too.
Yes, you
did.
But
they were made up into like you had Atsushi Onita was in there. There was a version of Liger in there, and there was like all these international characters that they renamed and they redid, and they kind of modified their looks as well. But clearly, if you're a fan, you know who these people are. The crazy part is that they kept their move sets.
Yes.
Which was the best part. So, like, if let's say you threw somebody outside of the ring and you want to do this lucha high spot where, like, you want to cartwheel and then somersault outside the ring, you can do that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Fly.
No worries.
Anyway, so, yeah.
Yeah, and World Tour.
Love that game, man.
I was going to say, and thanks to World Tour, we got some of the best, THQ obviously created some of the best, most iconic wrestling games in history. Because after the two WCW games were made, WWF got the license. They got the WWF license, and we got two of the best wrestling games ever made, which were WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy.
Yes.
But it all started with WCW NWO World Tour, and yeah, I remember that roster was huge. It then got even bigger with Revenge, WCW NWO Revenge, which was the sequel. But yeah, an excellent wrestling game, and you know what? One that I think is very It was very popular until the future ones came out, but still, definitely a good mention. The N64 game that popped into my head, which again I played but never finished because it was at the very end of the N64 cycle. All the other new systems were coming out. We were getting PlayStation 2. Xbox, Dreamcast, and then GameCube was popping out right there as not too long after as well. And so as a result, it didn't sell very well, but it didn't stop it from being a great game. And it was called Conker's Bad Fur Day. And a lot of people who play, who know, and it was developed by Rare. And if you buy the Rare Classics collection on your PlayStation or your Xbox today, you can actually get Conker's Bad Fur Day. And it was basically about this drunk, belligerent squirrel, and a really awful day that he's going through while he's got a hangover. And it's a cool 3D adventure that you go through. And it's crude, it's definitely adult, it's absurd, and it is hysterical.
I want to know what the game developers were on when they were thinking about this game.
I don't care what they were on because I'm sorry. I'm like, this one was an absolute win. They knocked it out of the park. It's a shame that it came out so late in the N64 life cycle because I guarantee you this was a game that would have sold tons had it come out a year or two earlier.
Jeez. Oh, man.
Yeah.
What was it called again?
Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yeah, do some research on that one. Trust me, you won't be disappointed.
What is that? Like a knockoff of Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Basically,
yeah.
With like I said, with a foul-mouthed squirrel with a hangover.
Oh, that's awesome, man! I gotta watch this now. You know what I was thinking about? I was maybe thinking about playing this game while I'm like, just I don't know. I gotta find out because I still have I still have my N64, so I gotta find this game now.
It's gonna cost you. It's gonna cost you some money. I'm not gonna lie. So. Yeah. Oh yeah, it definitely is. It's not cheap.
Oh man. Okay.
Because it didn't. There weren't a lot made because it didn't. It came out at the end and it didn't sell a lot. So.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Are we moving on to Dreamcast? Let's wrap this up.
Yeah, I have nothing else on the N64.
All right. Let's close up with Dreamcast then. What do you got for Dreamcast?
Okay. So. You said that the limit was up to what, 1999?
Yeah, 1999 in terms of systems. So anything on the Dreamcast would count.
Okay. There's two games I want to talk about. One of them was something that was just, I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the game Rez, R-E-Z.
So I'm actually not familiar with that.
Okay, so Rez is created by the United Game Artists. It came out in 2001 or 2002, around that point. It's classified as a rail shooter, single-player / music game. Okay. And what's interesting is that the graphics of it is just all the reason why you should play it. Okay. It's one of those things where it talks about how Rez was this AI, and I believe this is the story. Rez is an AI, and somehow, some way, there were hackers who tried to hack Rez. And what began to happen is that this project where the artificial intelligence actually overrides its commanders. and starts to take over. And you as the gamer are the ones who has to beat the system.
Okay.
And you have to beat, I think you have to beat Rez or something like that. That was so REZ,
Okay.
Rez for the Dreamcast. I mean, it's just, and a lot of it was really the whole selling point of that game was just its clear cut, amazing visuals, of explosions, of just the graphics put together, that just come like they literally come at you, which is just unreal.
Oh,
So
very
that
cool.
was that was my hidden gem, and I guess it's hidden if you haven't ever heard of it, right? So
Yeah, no, it was hidden to me. So,
me too. Until I actually seen a demo of it on YouTube.
oh, very cool. All right. The hidden gem I have, this one, and this one's a fun one for me to close off on because I remember when I first got this and I played it, how much I loved this game.
Okay.
And it was a survival horror based game that was not Resident Evil. Because Resident Evil and Silent Hill were like the big survival horror games.
Yeah.
This was an unconventional survival horror game, and it was called Ill Bleed.
Illbleed.
Remember
Yes.
Ill Bleed?
Yes, I do remember it. It
Yep.
is one of those weird, really, really
Yeah.
weird games. The plot is just eerie.
Yeah,
And
and I'm just gonna read from the back of the game
please
because
do.
it
Yep.
basically describes exactly the style, and I loved this game, absolutely loved this game, and still do. So imagine, if you will, a berserk B movie horror film producer with a twisted sense of humor who puts up $1 million to anyone who can survive his 7 movie themed worlds. It's a bloody mess of mutant monsters, over 1,000 traps and items, and abject terror fused with B-movie humor. You must rely solely on the game's sensory feedback, eyesight, hearing, smell, and sixth sense, and the hard-to-find horror monitor to survive this epic adventure. Ill Bleed delivers a badly needed transfusion to the been-there-done-that horror game genre. Now, what was cool about every level in this is you weren't fighting off monsters with weapons. The whole idea was you had to keep your you had to rely on your senses to figure out when like a scare was going to come at you, because if you weren't able to detect them, the scare would up your heartbeat, and when your heart rate got too high, basically you die from fright. And that was the
Oh,
whole concept.
jeez.
And that was the whole concept of the game. You were basically going through the levels trying to see where the scares were basically going to come at you so that you can keep your heart rate under control until you got to the end of the game, end of each level. And at the end of the level, you had some type of horror boss related to the level you were in. So if it was like a creepy carnival, I think there was like a psycho clown at the end, and so on and so forth.
Wow.
And then the way you would defeat the boss was you had to use the environment in that final stage to defeat the boss. But it was so unique because, and that's what I loved about it. It was so unique because you weren't just, oh, look, here's a machete, I'm going to hack and slash my way through this. You actually had to, it required a lot of thought and a lot of strategy as you were going through each level to survive it. And it was just a really, really cool game. Definitely one of my favorite games on the Dreamcast, hands down.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say the only one honorable mention, and I like this game a lot, and I played it a lot when it came out, was actually 1999's King of Fighters.
Oh,
Okay?
yeah, I remember King of Fighters.
Dream Match. Remember that? So
Yeah.
essentially, for those of you who don't know, the King of Fighters was actually SNK, the company SNK's answer to Street Fighter Alpha 3.
Yep.
Right? So that was kind of like them answering them back about Street Fighter Alpha 3. And what's interesting about this game is that if you are into this, okay, somehow, some way, every single character, okay, that appeared in the series from the King of Fighters 94 made it into this game. It's a massive, massive, diverse fighting game which had different styles, different gameplays. I mean, there's also like all the bosses, dead characters, including the sports team characters of King of Fighters 94 made it onto this game. And it was really good because it was just this fun, upbeat game where you just basically you kick butt and you had a good time doing it. It was just
Yeah.
it's hard to explain, but It was, and I think that was more towards the tail end of the Dreamcast system, right? 99, around that point, right?
But the King of Fighters series, like they were putting out one of those like every year, like going back into the 90s. So
yeah, but that one was by far my favorite one to play. You know, to me.
It was a very popular series in Japan that like never it came over here, but I don't think it you know, obviously it didn't.
It never clicked here. Yeah, it never
clicked here as well as like Street Fighter did. So,
right, exactly.
But it doesn't make it any less of a good game. It was a very solid game.
Yeah.
No question about that. So yeah, I think that kind of sums it up, man. We
one
went
heck of a list.
Yeah, it was a great list. It was actually I enjoyed hearing some of the surprises that I didn't know about that were on yours. Definitely some games I want to check out. And yeah, I mean, this is, and just like that, we are at the end of
Did a little bit of research for this one.
Yeah, and you know, and for this type of topic, you got to do a little bit of research, unless you know, again, unless you're like me and you still have most of these games, which it was kind of cool to go through my collection and like pull out. I'll be like, oh yeah, this is a great one that people don't know about or may not know about. So it was a lot of fun. And with that, like I said, we're at the end of another great episode. And I cannot thank you enough for filling in last minute for Larry. As always, it's a pleasure having you on the show.
I appreciate it.
And you know, really quickly, let our listeners and watchers know, you know, let them know where they can find you.
All right, fans. So we record the Yin and the Yang podcast, and it drops every Friday. We talk a lot about health, fitness, motivation, but our overall theme is we try to talk a lot about martial arts, mixed martial arts, that type of thing. So we really give you a plethora of just, and they all go hand in hand. You know, health, fitness, motivation goes hand in hand with the discipline of the martial arts. So we try to discuss that, any ongoing happenings within the health world. You know, like this week, we're going to try to really answer that age-old question of, you know, is coffee really good for you or is it bad for you? You know, in which after this, and I'll just put it to you this way, we'll talk also a lot about like what is the best, you know, what is considered an ideal personal trainer. We'll talk about, you know, what styles are good for what ages of children, that type of thing. So we are going to discuss a lot, you know, is martial arts good for seniors, that type of bit, you know. So we do take questions, and we'll drop some good extra added material. We're going to talk a lot also this week. I do a segment called Reclaiming You, where we talk about how to not become complacent after meeting a goal, you know, or how to get back into it. So there's going to be a lot. So I appreciate it if you'd all tune in.
Yeah, very cool. And, you know, you can catch Anthony's podcast, the Yin and the Yang Podcast, on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's on Spreaker. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, just check it out. It's an absolutely great show. And thank you again, Ant, for being here this week.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate appreciate you giving me the time.
Yeah. Oh no, dude. Don't worry about it. It's all like I said. It's always a blast having you on here. Right. And of course, the Retro Gamers. You can listen to us on. You can see us on YouTube. You can check us out on Facebook.com/Retro Gamers Podcast. On Instagram, at Retro Gamers Podcast, and you can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you, and again. Thank you so much for all of you out there who continue to listen to us, and we will catch you next week on the Retro Gamers Podcast.